The alien Federation had watched Earth for decades from the safety of their distant star systems, convinced that humans were nothing more than reckless apes struggling to survive on a savage death world. They would never understand the Federation was old and wise in their own eyes. Their vast empire spanned across countless worlds, and they had seen all manner of species rise and fall, but none had ever posed a real threat to their dominance. They had conquered and subdued entire civilizations with ease. Their advanced technology and superior intellect had always been enough to crush any opposition. So when they first detected humanity on the fringes of their space, they saw it as little more than a curiosity, a fleeting blip on the radar, something to study from a distance and laugh at. But there were warnings, there were whispers in the dark corners of the Federation, voices that raised doubts, that tried to caution the leadership to take humanity seriously, but they were dismissed as fools. The reports of human resilience were seen as exaggerated, as myths told by paranoid observers. Their technology was crude, their culture chaotic, their history one of constant war and destruction. So the idea that they could ever pose a serious challenge was laughable to the majority of the Federation leaders. They believed humanity was doomed to destroy itself long before it could ever reach the stars. They had seen it happen countless times before. Species that failed to evolve or adapt to their environment and perished from their own folly. It was the natural order of things, yet, even as they laughed and mocked humanity's primitive state, they couldn't deny a strange feeling creeping into the back of their minds. There was something about these humans that felt different, something about their world that defied the rules of the galaxy. It wasn't just the violence that thrived on their world, it was the survival instincts, their ability to endure extreme conditions and adapt to the harshest environments. It was a quality the Federation had never encountered before, and they didn't know how to explain it. But it was nothing more than a fleeting thought, easily ignored. After all, no one had ever challenged the Federation's rule, and there was no reason to believe that would change any time soon. The human ships that ventured into their space were met with indifference. The Federation saw no need to respond to such primitive vessels. But that was their first mistake. Instead of fleeing or submitting to the superior forces of the Federation, the humans did something unexpected. They sent messages boldly requesting to join the Federation. This simple message sent shockwaves through the ranks of the Federation leaders, who had dismissed the humans as nothing more than ignorant and misguided. The tone of the human response was unlike anything they had expected. Instead of cowering in fear or begging for mercy, the humans demanded something far more audacious. They demanded equality. They demanded a place among the stars. They spoke of their achievements, their survival against the odds, their endless wars against the dangers of their own planet, and their triumphs over the odds that sought to kill them at every turn. It was a claim unlike any other made by any species the Federation had ever encountered. How could a species that lived on such a hostile planet, with such primitive technology, think they were worthy of entering the ranks of the galactic elite? The Federation's leaders were bewildered. Who did these humans think they were to demand such a thing? They had no right to be here, no place in the grand scheme of the galaxy. And yet, despite their arrogance, the Federation felt a strange unease grow at the edges of their minds. What if these humans were more than they appeared? What if the stories were true? What if the warnings had been right, and they had underestimated the Deathworlders? The Federation leaders laughed it off, brushing aside the fear that lingered like a shadow in the corners of their thoughts. They had seen no evidence that humanity could ever pose a real threat, but the unease remained. It was only a matter of time before they saw the true nature of the humans, and soon they would regret ever dismissing them. Despite the warnings from most few within the Federation who had studied humanity closely, the majority of the leadership continued to dismiss the humans as no more than a nuisance. They assumed their brash message was just another display of primitive arrogance from a species who had no understanding of their place in the universe. They saw it as a fluke, an outlier in the grand scheme of things, a minor irritation, soon to be forgotten like so many others before it. So the Federation leaders continued their routine. They moved on to their next issue and ignored the human threat, assuming it would fade away with time. The humans, however, had other plans. As soon as they were aware that their message had not been taken seriously, they doubled down. They sent more ships, more messages, more envoys and ambassadors. Their demands became more insistent, their confidence grew, and their presence became harder to ignore. They were everywhere. they began popping up in every corner of the galaxy, as if they were a pestilence spreading far and wide. The alien races that had previously been so content in their own territories now found themselves dealing with the ever-expanding influence of these Deathworlders. They couldn't understand it. How were these humans, so resourceful, so relentless, how had they managed to infiltrate every corner of the galaxy, despite being so technologically backward? At least in comparison to the more advanced species they encountered, even the most primitive alien species they faced were baffled by their resilience. Humanity's ability to adapt to any situation and overcome any obstacle seemed limitless. They were like cockroaches surviving in the harshest environments, refusing to die, no matter what the aliens did to stamp them out. At first, they tried to ignore the humans, thinking if they just gave them no attention they would tire of their efforts, but it only made the humans more determined. They didn't care about the Federation's disdain. They didn't care about being dismissed or belittled. They simply pressed forward, continuing to claim what they felt was rightfully theirs. Eventually, it became clear that ignoring them was no longer an option. Humanity had no intention of backing down or bowing to the so-called superiority of the Federation. The humans weren't looking for permission, they were taking what they wanted no matter who stood in their way. The alien races that had always been too proud to acknowledge the humans now found themselves confronted by an unstoppable force. It wasn't just the Federation that was feeling the pressure, it was everyone. Every species and every empire that had assumed humanity was nothing more than a flash in the pan realized they were wrong. The human ships didn't stop coming, they didn't slow down, they kept advancing, they kept building, they kept conquering. And the Federation's response was slow and disorganized. They weren't prepared for this kind of fight. Their technological superiority wasn't enough to counter the ferocity of the human resolve. They couldn't understand it. These humans had survived in the most brutal conditions of their own planet, a death world where the environment itself seemed to conspire against them, where everything from the air they breathed to the creatures they shared their world with was hostile. Yet they had endured, they had thrived. The Federation had never encountered anything like it. They were used to fighting species that would eventually bend to their will or perish. But humanity was different. It was as if they had found strength in their struggles. They had grown stronger with every hardship they faced, with every war they fought. Humanity's will to survive seemed to be endless, and the Federation's greatest mistake was failing to recognize it. The more they watched the humans, the more they realized that these were not the same creatures they had dismissed so easily. These were Deathworlders forged in the fires of their hostile homeworld. These were creatures who would not break or bow, they would not bend, and they would never give up. Humanity had come to stay, and the galaxy was about to find out just how far they were willing to go. The Federation leaders finally began to realize that their previous dismissals of humanity had been a grave mistake. They watched in growing disbelief as human colonies began to establish themselves across the galaxy. Each new settlement was a challenge to their authority. Each new human ship that arrived in their space carried with it a reminder of their era. The humans weren't just survivors, they were relentless in their pursuit of their goals. They had no fear, no hesitation. They attacked every challenge head-on with an unmatched ferocity that the Federation had never encountered before. They quickly adapted to their surroundings and exploited any weakness they found in the alien empires they encountered. Their fleets were small, but their tactics were brutal and efficient. They didn't rely on the same flashy technology or elaborate strategies that the more advanced species used. Instead, the humans fought with sheer willpower and ruthlessness. Their ships were armed with primitive yet effective weapons. They used their knowledge of their own hostile world to outthink their opponents, and every victory, no matter how small, only fueled their determination to push further. The Federation had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. They had thought that humanity would eventually turn on itself or collapse under the weight of their own chaos. But the opposite was happening. Instead of fracturing under pressure, humanity seemed to unite more than ever before. The Federation had never seen a species quite like this. Their history was one of division, conflict, and constant struggle. But somehow these humans were able to rally together in times of crisis and push forward toward their goals without hesitation or doubt. The more the Federation observed, the more they realized that the humans had learned to thrive on adversity. They didn't fear death or danger, they embraced it. It was as if their entire existence had been a preparation for this very moment. Each war, each battle, each hardship they faced on their homeworld had made them stronger. It had shaped them into something the galaxy had never seen before, something the Federation had never expected. Their unrelenting spirit was their greatest weapon. It wasn't about technology or firepower. It was about the will to fight and survive no matter the cost. And as the Federation's leaders began to digest this new reality, they found themselves at a crossroads. They could no longer dismiss the humans as a minor nuisance. They could no longer ignore the threat they posed. The question now was what to do about it. How could they stop a species that had survived on a death world for so long? How could they fight back against a force that seemed to grow stronger with every conflict, with every encounter? The Federation had faced many challenges before, but nothing like this. This wasn't just a battle of technology or resources. This was a battle of wills, and the humans had shown that their will was unbreakable. Every strategy the Federation employed to neutralize humanity seemed to fall short. The more they fought, the more the humans adapted and improved. They learned quickly and were able to exploit weaknesses the Federation had never even considered. Their technology was crude compared to the Federation's vast array of advanced weaponry, but it was effective. And what it lacked in sophistication, it made up for in sheer brutality. The humans didn't play by the same rules, they didn't follow the same tactics. They were unpredictable and wild. And that was their greatest advantage. The Federation had spent centuries creating order and structure, but humanity thrived in chaos. They didn't need elaborate plans or careful strategies. They simply acted, they simply fought. And each battle they won only served to further cement the idea in the minds of the Federation leaders that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. Their once dismissed warnings began to ring in their ears louder and louder. The voices of those who had tried to warn them had been right. And now they were left wondering if it was too late to stop the human tide from sweeping over them. The first human fleet that entered the heart of the Federation's space sent shockwaves through the galaxy. It was not large, but it was highly effective. Its ships moved with precision and purpose, striking targets with an intensity that left the Federation scrambling to react. It was not the technology that made the human fleet dangerous. It was their unpredictability, their willingness to sacrifice anything and everything for victory. They fought with a ferocity that the Federation had not anticipated. The humans did not fear death. They did not fear the vast armadas of the Federation. They did not care for the laws of war. They only cared about one thing: survival. They came from a death world, one where survival was never guaranteed. And this made them fearless. No one had ever seen anything like it before in the galactic community. A species that refused to be broken, a species that would fight until the very last man, woman, or child. If it meant holding onto their existence, the Federation began to panic. The first skirmishes were small, but each one left a deep scar on their pride. Each victory for humanity sent ripples through their society. They could no longer deny the threat these humans posed. The Federation's military leadership called for a full-scale response, but their forces were stretched thin across the galaxy. They could not concentrate their power on one enemy without leaving themselves vulnerable elsewhere. Meanwhile, the human ships kept coming. They pushed deeper and deeper into Federation space. The humans knew no fear, no hesitation. Every battle they fought was another step toward victory. Every victory was another piece of territory they claimed, and still the Federation couldn't figure out how to stop them. The humans fought like animals in the wild. They didn't follow predictable tactics. They didn't adhere to the rules of engagement. They fought with a viciousness born from centuries of survival on a planet that wanted them dead at every turn. They threw their forces into battle without regard for their own losses. They were willing to sacrifice their own ships and crews if it meant forcing their enemies into retreat. And each time the Federation tried to mount a counteroffensive, the humans adapted. They learned from each failure and used it to become even more dangerous. The Federation's fleets began to suffer heavy casualties as they encountered human warships that seemed to always be one step ahead. No matter what the Federation threw at them, the humans always found a way to win. They attacked at night. They attacked during the day. They attacked in ways no one could predict. Their tactics were a complete mystery to the Federation. And it was becoming clear that the humans had learned how to fight a war that no one else had ever fought before. The Federation had prided itself on its advanced technology, but the humans didn't need the same technology. They relied on something much more dangerous: their instincts, their ability to learn and adapt. Their sheer will to survive. The Federation's warships were fast and powerful, but they were not prepared for the raw determination of the human fleet. They had underestimated the humans in every way, and now they were paying the price. The humans continued to push forward each victory, making them bold at each victory, building their momentum. And as the Federation began to question their own superiority, they realized they were no longer in control of the situation. They had been the ones to dominate the galaxy for centuries, and now they were facing a species that threatened to take it all away. The balance of power was shifting, and the Federation could do nothing to stop it. Humanity had shown them that no matter how advanced they were, no matter how much power they wielded in the galaxy, they could still be defeated by a species that refused to back down. And for the first time in centuries, the Federation was afraid that the Deathworlders might just take everything from them. The situation grew more dire with every passing day. The Federation's once proud military might seem powerless against the relentless human advance. Each time they thought they had gained the upper hand, the humans struck again from an unexpected angle. They had no patterns, no predictability. And that was what made them so dangerous. The humans didn't rely on the same strategies that the Federation had used for centuries. They didn't follow the established doctrines of war that the other species adhered to. They simply fought with everything they had in them. No matter the odds, it was as if they had nothing to lose. And this made them the most terrifying adversary the Federation had ever encountered. At first, the Federation had assumed that humanity's success was nothing more than luck, a stroke of fortune that would eventually run out. But luck didn't account for the brutality of human tactics. It didn't explain the way humans were able to turn every defeat into a lesson, and every lesson into a new strength. It didn't account for the way they adapted to every challenge. No matter how insurmountable it seemed, the Federation's leaders began to argue among themselves about what to do next. Some believed they should negotiate with the humans and offer them a place within the Federation, hoping that this would satisfy their demands. Others wanted to crush humanity once and for all, to wipe them out before they could spread any further, but both options seemed impossible. The Federation had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they had no idea how to stop them. They had once believed that they were the pinnacle of evolution, the masters of the galaxy, but now they were being shown that there were creatures out there who were not only capable of challenging their authority, but of defeating it outright. The human ships kept coming. The Federation's fleets were unable to stop them. No matter how many battles they fought, no matter how many reinforcements they sent, the humans continued to push deeper into their space. It was as if the more they fought, the more humanity's strength grew. They couldn't understand it, and the fear that had started as a faint whisper grew louder with each passing moment. The Federation's military leaders knew they had to act fast before humanity reached the heart of their empire, before they took the very core of their power. But even as they prepared for a final confrontation, they knew deep down that they had already lost. Humanity was not just a threat to their empire. Humanity was a threat to the very idea of the Federation itself. The idea that a single species could stand against them and take everything they had built shook the foundation of everything. The Federation believed they had spent centuries building an empire based on superiority and dominance. But now they were faced with a species that didn't recognize their power, didn't care for their authority. Humanity had no interest in diplomacy or appeasing the Federation. They didn't want to join the galaxy's elite. They didn't want to submit to the Federation's rules. They simply wanted to survive. They wanted to thrive, and they were willing to fight for it with every ounce of their being. The Federation tried to gather its forces for a decisive strike. But even then, they knew it wouldn't be enough. Humanity had already proven that they could adapt to anything the Federation threw at them. They had already proven that they could take on forces far superior to their own and win. And now the Federation had to face the terrifying realization that their own empire could fall to a species that was only just beginning to learn the true scale of their power. Humanity was unlike any species they had ever encountered. They were not bound by the rules of the galaxy. They did not care for the order the Federation had worked so hard to maintain. They were something new, something dangerous. and the galaxy would never be the same again. As the Federation scrambled to prepare their final counterattack, they began to realize just how outmatched they truly were. Humanity's tactics had evolved beyond anything they could have imagined. They had learned to turn every disadvantage into an advantage. Their raw adaptability was unlike anything the Federation had encountered. They used their primitive technology in ways no one thought possible. They had no respect for the traditional rules of engagement. They fought dirty, they fought fiercely, and most terrifying of all, they fought to win. No matter the cost, the Federation's military had grown complacent over the centuries. They had become used to overwhelming superiority, and they had never expected a species to challenge them. Like this, the thought that a species from a hostile Deathworld could not only survive, but thrive against the galaxy's most advanced forces was beyond comprehension. Humanity's will to survive was unmatched in the Federation's eyes. Their defiance was a force all its own, and it left the galaxy's most powerful empire scrambling to respond. They tried to deploy their most advanced fleets, their greatest weaponry, their elite troops, but none of it seemed to make a difference. The humans had learned to fight in a way that the Federation's technology couldn't counter. Their adaptability was their greatest weapon, and the more the Federation tried to crush them, the more they seemed to evolve. The humans had no shortage of resources, they had no shortage of willpower, and they had no shortage of creativity. They could not be predicted, they could not be contained. They used their enemies' weaknesses against them. They exploited every opportunity, no matter how small. They created havoc wherever they went, and the Federation found itself unable to control the chaos. The battle lines blurred as humanity advanced deeper into Federation territory. Their fleets cut through once untouchable sectors like a blade through paper. Every planet they took was a victory. Every victory was a message to the Federation, a message that no matter how many times they fought back, humanity would never stop. They had underestimated the humans at every turn, and now the Federation had to face the reality of their mistake. Humanity was not a species to be ignored. They were not a species to be cowed or crushed. They were a species of fighters born from a world that had never given them an easy path. They had fought their way to the stars, and they weren't going to stop now. The Federation leaders convened in emergency sessions attempting to come up with a solution, but nothing seemed to work. Their technological advantage was fading fast, and every tactic they tried only resulted in more casualties. The humans were everywhere, their forces were relentless. They spread like wildfire across the galaxy, and even the most fortified defenses crumbled in their wake. The aliens who once mocked humanity now watched in horror as the Deathworlders showed them exactly what they were capable of. There was no going back for the Federation. They had pushed humanity into a corner, and now the humans were pushing back with everything they had. The once feared Federation had become a shadow of its former self. Their greatest strength had turned into their greatest weakness. They had become too comfortable, too complacent, and humanity's tenacity had shattered that comfort in a way no one had thought possible. And still the humans pressed on. They had no intention of stopping their forward march. They had no intention of turning back. Their eyes were set on victory, and they would not be denied. The Federation leaders could see the writing on the wall. The humans were unstoppable, and there was nothing they could do to change it. It was no longer a matter of if humanity would succeed, but when, and the Federation was left to wonder how they had allowed this to happen, how they had allowed their arrogance and their fear of change to blind them to the growing threat that humanity represented. As humanity continued its relentless advance, the Federation found itself cornered, no longer able to rely on their overwhelming technological superiority. They watched as more and more of their planets fell to the human war machine. Each loss was another blow to their pride. Each defeat was a reminder of their failure to recognize the threat that humanity posed. They had underestimated the Deathworlders at every turn, and now they were paying the price. The Federation's leadership began to splinter as they debated what to do next. Some factions still clung to the idea that a military response could turn the tide, but the reality was clear to those who had been paying attention. Humanity was not an enemy that could be defeated with brute force. Their adaptability, their drive to survive, was beyond anything the Federation had ever faced. They fought not just for territory or resources, but for something deeper, for the very survival of their species. The Federation's best strategists tried to come up with new tactics, but it was becoming increasingly clear that the humans had already anticipated every move. They were never where the Federation expected them. They always seemed to be one step ahead. No matter how many times they were pushed back, humanity would always find a way to return stronger and more determined than before. The human fleet didn't just fight to win, they fought to survive. They fought because they had no other choice, and that made them more dangerous than anything the Federation had encountered. The Federation was running out of options. They had sent envoys to negotiate with the humans, but every attempt was met with refusal. Humanity wasn't interested in diplomacy. They weren't interested in joining some galactic alliance. They wanted to carve out their own place in the galaxy, and they would do whatever it took to get it. They were a species that had spent centuries struggling to survive on a planet that wanted them dead. They had learned the art of survival in the harshest conditions imaginable, and now they were bringing that same drive and tenacity to the stars. The Federation had no experience with an enemy like this. They had fought wars before, but they had never faced an opponent that didn't fear death or destruction. They had never fought a species that viewed every challenge as an opportunity to grow stronger. Every time they encountered humanity, they learned something new. They adapted to each defeat and used it to fuel their next attack. The Federation's military leaders tried to regroup and form new strategies, but the humans were already in their head. They knew what the Federation would do before the Federation did it. They could read the signs. They understood the tactics the Federation would use, and they countered them every time the Federation realized they couldn't win through conventional means. They turned to their most desperate weapon, their advanced biological warfare technology. They had created strains of viruses and bacteria that could wipe out entire populations in a matter of days. They thought this would be the end of humanity. But even this was not enough. The humans had survived in environments that were hostile to life itself. They had faced extinction countless times on their homeworld, and each time they had overcome it. No matter what the Federation threw at them, humanity adapted. They evolved. They endured the biological weapons the Federation unleashed had no effect on humanity. Their bodies were more resilient than the Federation had anticipated. Their immune systems more advanced than even the Federation's best scientists could understand. The Federation's desperation only grew as they realized they were facing a species that had the capacity to survive and adapt to anything. Even the deadliest of diseases had no effect on them. This was a species that had already conquered death itself in a way the Federation could never have imagined. And now they were bringing that same defiance to the stars. The Federation was no longer just fighting to maintain their empire. They were fighting for survival. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were learning that some mistakes were too costly to fix. They had allowed the humans to grow too powerful, and now they were witnessing the consequences of that decision. The realization hit the Federation like a tidal wave. They had not just underestimated humanity, they had completely misunderstood what made them dangerous. They had thought the humans could be crushed by force or manipulated by fear. But humanity was not like other species. They didn't bend, they didn't break, they didn't bow to power. They stood their ground and fought back with a ferocity that was unmatched. No matter how many times the Federation struck at them, the humans simply refused to stay down. And as the Federation scrambled to come up with a new plan, they realized with dread that they were not in control anymore. The humans were now dictating the pace of the war. They were everywhere, and the Federation could no longer keep up. They had tried everything. They had thrown everything they had into the battle, and yet humanity kept growing stronger. They had expected the humans to falter, to tire, but they did the opposite. Every time they were pushed, they came back with more intensity and more determination than before. Humanity had learned to use the very chaos that had once threatened to tear them apart to fuel their conquest. Their warships were not just machines of destruction. They were symbols of survival and willpower. Each human ship was a testament to their species' indomitable spirit. The Federation had seen nothing like it before. Their fleets had once been the pinnacle of military might, but now they were being chased back every time they tried to mount a defense. Humanity struck from an unexpected angle. They had learned to adapt to the Federation's tactics and turn them against their enemies. Their ships flew with ruthless precision. Their soldiers fought with a unity that the Federation had never seen before. They were a single force moving forward with unstoppable momentum. and the Federation could do nothing to halt their advance. They had tried to negotiate with the humans, but the humans had made it clear that they would never bow to anyone. They had no interest in joining the Federation. They had no interest in being part of any galactic alliance. They wanted their own place in the galaxy, and they would carve it out no matter the cost. The Federation tried to rally its allies, but even the other species in the galaxy were beginning to question their loyalty to the once mighty empire. They had seen what humanity was capable of, and they were beginning to wonder if they had backed the wrong side. Humanity had no fear of alliances or power structures. They fought for themselves, and they fought for each other. They had no king, no emperor, no leader. They were a collective force. Each human was as vital to the cause as the next, and their shared purpose made them unstoppable. The Federation had no such unity. They had a hierarchy, a structure that was based on control and power. But in the face of humanity's unity, their structure began to fall apart. The more they fought humanity, the more the Federation's weaknesses became apparent. Their empire was based on order and stability, but humanity thrived in chaos and unpredictability. The Federation could no longer maintain the illusion of invincibility. Their forces were stretched thin. Their morale was crumbling. Their very foundation was beginning to fracture. And as they faced the inevitable collapse of their once great empire, the Federation's leaders were forced to ask themselves one question: could they even stop humanity anymore? Could they halt the tide of destruction that had come for them? Could they even survive against a species that had proven they were willing to fight until the last breath? And as the answer became more and more clear, the Federation's fate was sealed. Humanity was no longer just a force in the galaxy. They were a movement. They were an unstoppable wave, crushing across everything in their path, and the Federation had no hope of stopping them. The galaxy would never be the same again. Humanity had shown that they were more than just survivors. They were conquerors. And now they were coming for the stars themselves. The final days of the Federation were like a slow collapse, a gradual unraveling of everything they had once held dear. Humanity's relentless assault had shattered their confidence and their will to fight. They had fought to hold on to power, but in the end their power had been nothing more than an illusion. The Deathworlders had torn through their defenses and their pride like a knife through paper. And now the galaxy watched as the once mighty Federation crumbled beneath the weight of its own arrogance. The leaders of the Federation tried to make one last stand, but it was clear to everyone that it was already too late. Humanity had won the war not because of superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but because they had something the Federation could never understand. They had the will to survive, the will to fight no matter the cost. And no matter the odds. When humanity had first begun its journey into space, the Federation had dismissed them as nothing more than a primitive species from a backwater planet. They had laughed at their primitive tools and mocked their lack of sophistication. But now humanity had proven that it was not their tools that made them strong. It was their spirit, their resilience, their unyielding determination to survive. The Federation had underestimated them at every turn, and now they had paid the price. The human fleets were no longer just a threat. They were a symbol of the galaxy's future, a future where humanity would no longer be held back by the limitations of its past, where they would no longer be confined to the fringes of the galaxy. They had carved their place among the stars, and they were not about to let anyone take it from them. Humanity's victory over the Federation had become a rallying cry to all those who had once been oppressed by the galaxy's most powerful empire. They had shown the galaxy that it was possible to rise up against overwhelming odds and emerge victorious. They had shown that even the most dominant powers could fall when faced with a species that refused to be conquered. The galaxy began to change as humanity spread its influence beyond the Federation's shattered borders. The once feared empire was no more, and in its place a new order began to emerge, an order built on the ideals of strength and unity, and the unwavering belief that no matter where they came from, no matter what challenges they faced, humanity would always fight to the end, and they would never be defeated. The Federation's leaders were brought to trial for their failures, for their arrogance, and for their blind belief in their own superiority. They were made to answer for the lives lost and the destruction they had caused. But it was too little, too late. Their empire was gone, and nothing could bring it back. The galaxy had been forever changed by humanity's rise to power. They had shown the universe that even in the darkest of times, there was always hope. And that hope was something that no empire, no matter how powerful, could ever extinguish. Humanity had proven that they were not just survivors, they were the future of the galaxy. And as the Federation's remnants scattered across the stars, they were forced to face the truth: humanity had taken their place at the top, and they would never let it go. The Deathworlders had come from a planet that wanted them dead, but they had proven that even in the face of extinction, they would fight until the end. They had shown the galaxy that nothing could stop them, and that the universe would never be the same again. Humanity was no longer just a species, they were a force of nature, a reminder that even in the vastness of the cosmos, no one could stand in the way of a species determined to survive.